of men Agamemnon. If only you'd never begged the dauntless son of Peleus, holding out to Achilles trove on trove of gifts. In other words, Diomedes says, you made a mistake sending this embassy to Achilles and offering all of this to him. He's a proud man at the best of times, and now you've only plunged him deeper in his pride. I say, have done with the man, whether he sails for home or stays on here. He'll fight again in his own good time, whenever the courage in him flares and a god fires his blood. Some foreshadowing, obviously that will happen. So come, follow my orders, and all of us unite. Go to sleep now, full to your heart's content with food and wine, a soldier's strength and nerve. Then, when the dawn's red fingers shine in all their glory, quickly deploy your chariots and battalions, Agamemnon out in front of the ships. You spur them on, and you yourself, you fight in the front ranks. This is a very subtle shift here for Diomedes. He says, hey, instead of asking that Achilles comes and saves us, why don't you go ahead and lead us? Why don't you prove that you really are the man you say that you are? It's a very interesting kind of subtle, one more rhetorical technique. Again, this is a brilliant book. I hope that you're kind of getting a sense of all the different ways that our poet is showing us the different ways that speech can work. And we're told, Achaeus' kings all shouted their assent, stirred by the stallion breaking Diomedes' challenge, pouring cups to the gods. Each warlord sought his shelter. There they spent the night and took the gift of sleep. Notice the last words are gift and sleep. This has been a book about gifts. And of course, here we are with sleep at the very end. And we think immediately of Achilles and Patroclus sleeping with their girls in a tent, clearly not too wound up about all that's gone on. All right, let's jump quickly to 2a. Well, obviously some major themes here. Wounded pride is a powerful thing, and some men, we should point out, another message, they can't be bought. It's really probably more about power, and it's about resentment, and it's about embarrassment, and therefore to accept Agamemnon's gift makes Agamemnon somehow more powerful, and Achilles can have none of that. Another major message is sometimes words just, they can't. They can and they won't work, right? I mean, you just can't. There's more to it than simply words. Sometimes there's got to just be action. At 2b with symbols, well, I think that there's a lot that's been written about this Achilles and his lyre, singing himself an epic song, right? And the fact that here in the very heart of this epic song about heroes, we have Achilles singing songs of heroes. Instead of fighting, he's singing about it. I think that another symbol is obviously Achilles' rage. It's mentioned in the opening line of the poem. Peleus is also mentioned. Notice how book 9 then kind of is a summation of the first 9 books, bringing us to Achilles' rage, right? It's how we started. And now, of course, think of it. This rage will lead to the death of Patroclus, to the death of Hector, and of course, by extension, to Achilles' own death, because it's clear he's going to choose that fate. Out of the 2 options, he will choose that fate to go ahead and fight at the walls of Troy, and himself die. The irony, of course, of this book, book 9, is that money won't change Achilles' mind, but the death of Patroclus will. And why does Patroclus die? Because Achilles refuses the money or the team A, right? Achilles will choose the fate that, of course, he has options A and B. He will choose that fate to stay and die later, right? Okay, at 3a, well, think about it. Books 1 through 8 kind of brought us here. And now we maybe do judge Achilles differently after this book. What are some other texts that come to mind for you where a person refuses to be bought off, or a stubborn person is stubborn, but ultimately to his or her own demise? What are the texts that kind of come here? I'm going to point out, and I hope that you write down at 3a, when we get to Beowulf Part 2, and Beowulf speaks to King Hrothgar, okay, and he will say, "Sorrow not, brave one, better for man to avenge a friend than much to mourn. Aschir has been killed by Grendel's mother," right? He says that Gerdian is best treasure. When his name survives him, all men must die. Let him who may win glory ere death. And so we're back to that notion of kleos, that idea that you prove your worth in the final moments of your life by the way that you die. That's what Beowulf says in Beowulf 2. We'll get to those lines later. At 3b, a few questions. Again, I'll try and help you to relate to this personally. Do you agree or disagree with Achilles' choice? Right? Which of the 3 arguments, another question, of the three, from Odysseus to Phoenix to finally Ajax, which of the three do you think were the strongest in your estimation, and why? Have you ever been in a situation where people try to convince you to do something and you clearly were not going to be convinced? What kind of arguments did they use? Okay. Notice a very subtle one, back to 3A for just a second. When Lady Macbeth tries to convince Macbeth to do what probably, obviously, he shouldn't do, kill Duncan in his own house, right? And Act 1, Scene 7, notice she calls into question Macbeth's love of and for her, and then also the fact that he's not a real man, right? Did any of the three use that as an argument, rhetorically speaking? Do you think, another question, do you think Agamemnon in the end gets what he deserves? Do you think Achilles gets what he deserves? And what about all of the innocents that are a part of this, right? The collateral damage of, for example, Patroclus, and then, of course, all the others to come. In many ways now, the poem is going to shift. Books 10 through 15, the Trojans are going to do what they have to do at the wall, at the ships of the Greeks. Finally, that will lead Patroclus to enter in book 16, the death of Patroclus. By book 22, we'll have, of course, Hector and Achilles fighting and the death of Hector. And then it's over. By book 24, we'll have the father of Hector, Priam, the king of Troy, begging for his son's body back. We'll have a burial of Hector, and then the poem will end. In many ways, this is not a poem about the fall of Troy, although it is called the Iliad. It's really a poem about a hero. That's how it begins, Achilles. And a hero. That's how it ends, Hector. And in between, we get this interesting tension between Achilles and Agamemnon. Everything in the end winds to its anticipated end after this book. Now let's turn to book 10, and we're going to have the Greeks attempt to kind of spy at night, and then move on to the end of the Iliad. I hope that you are enjoying this study as much as am I. Thank you.